All right, so
So,
I think we've hit the top of the hour, so I'm going to quickly transition over there. Hey, gang, everyone there online, appreciate you showing up. I know it's a kind of a late notice, like always, but we'll stick this out on YouTube eventually, and so this will be part of our tooling series. With me today, I have Ken Puls, who is, Ken, correct if I'm wrong, owner of excelguru.com, right? That's your space?
excelguru.ca. We're proudly Canadian. Yeah, the .com is somebody else. So
Gotcha.
I made the mistake of not getting that domain.
So Ken is an expert in MVP in the Excel space, just tons of knowledge. And you've been doing Excel stuff, gosh, Ken, forever, right? How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing Excel longer than I haven't. I'd say that. Definitely tipped over that. But I mean, you know, I've been working with Excel since like version 5, and I mean, I think the current version I think is 16, 3 times over with Office 365. Yeah, long time.
So he's an expert in this area. Ken has a brand new tool that he's developed. It's been out just a couple months, I believe, and it's an add-in for Excel to help you just build better modeling and capabilities inside Excel. So Ken's going to give us an introduction today, and let me send Ken live here so he can give you his introduction. So Ken Puls, thanks very much for attending today. I appreciate it. Go ahead and do your intro.
Cool. I'm just going to kick over here. Have we got my screen up now?
I've got your screen. Let me throw you on screen and your video.
All right.
There we go, and it should be going live now.
Cool, awesome. So today what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk a little bit about Monkey Tools, which is an add-in software that we've been building here to try and help Excel modelers build better models faster. Although one of the interesting things around business intelligence modeling in Excel is that there's very strong tie-ins to Power BI, and we have some overlap in those areas as well that we're going to look at as well as we go through some demos along the way here. Just a little bit about me, just to sort of round out some of the background that Mike had mentioned here. I am actually a fully designated accountant in Canada. I am a chartered professional accountant, also a chartered or certified management accountant, although I started as a CMA and became a CPA when we amalgamated all the accounting bodies in Canada under one designation. I've also been awarded as a fellow of our organization, which is an honor given to about 4% of accountants during their lifetime, really recognizing what I've done to try and help advance the profession in talking about stuff like this. I do run excelguru.ca. That's my website. We've got a blog and a forum and a whole bunch of knowledge-based help articles there, both for Excel and Power BI. We like to focus on VBA, Power Query, things like that makes people's lives a little bit easier and a little bit faster to work around with things. I'm also one of the founding partners of skillwave.training, which is a site that we are working very hard on with myself and Miguel Escobar and Matt Allington. We are trying to build the best self-service business intelligence training products that you can ever find in the world. So if you're interested in getting some good training, check out skillwave.training. We've got a new dimensional modeling course that's actually just launched to go with our Power Query Academy, and we've got other things that are going in very quickly here. I am a Microsoft MVP, have been since 2006 across a variety of different categories, including Excel, where I was for 10 years. I was in data platform or the Power BI space for a few years as well, and I'm now back in Office apps and services. So I actually stepped backwards and forwards across the category platforms because a lot of the stuff that I do in both Power Query and Power Pivot and Excel is directly translatable across to Power BI, and that's actually a lot of the way that I like to work is very much in that particular space. Working with both products, actually. I am an author of M is for Data Monkey, which is sort of known as the book about Power Query out there, and I'm also a software developer for the software called Monkey Tools, and my main business is training people on how to use these software products properly. So I wear a lot of hats, doing a lot of different things, and I'm happy here to show you off some of the stuff that I've done around the software development side to try and make your life a little bit easier. Before we do that, though, what I want to just quickly cover off is sort of give a little bit of background about my modeling philosophy when I'm actually building things here. I actually got asked a question on Twitter this morning of, so Ken, now that there's a lot of stuff that's being done in Power BI, do you see that people are going to end up moving everything to Power BI and dropping Excel and whatnot? And my answer to that was, no, give me a break.
This is a great point. I love this point.
It drives me crazy because, like, people that look at it, I kind of look at it and go, anybody that thinks that Power BI's sole purpose in life is to get rid of Excel isn't using Excel for the right purposes anyway. And that's the big issue that you've got here. These two tools work better together.
Yeah.
For me personally, I actually start virtually every single model that I build, I actually start in Excel. I actually don't open Power BI Desktop all that often. Not to say that there aren't things that I do need to do in Power BI Desktop, because there are. I don't have custom connectors in Excel. That drives me crazy. I want them because then I could do a lot of work in Excel. As it is, one of the models I built, I had to build in Power BI Desktop, publish to Power BI, and then use Analyze in Excel to bring it back to Excel so that I could actually do the work I needed to do. Because I do a lot of work with forecasting and budgeting, and that requires inputs on the fly. They're really hard to do in Power BI, but in Excel, it's really easy. But the nice thing about Excel is that once I've actually built my model in Excel using Power Query, pulling from web-based data sources and doing my transformations, building my Power Pivot models, I can then just go and straight out publish that into Power BI. Once I have it in Power BI, I can go and I can build some more reports, and then I can go and share it with my audience. And the beauty part of this, of course, is that we get all of the nice richness of Power BI's visual stack in Power BI Online. We get the ability to share securely with people, and I can even connect to it and use Analyze in Excel to even get more out of it I need to. But the key part is that Excel, for me, is my data visual studio, or it is my Power BI desktop in a lot of cases. On the other hand, there are some times when I'll look at and go, you know what, I need some of the features that are in Power BI. Maybe there's some things that I don't have access to, like custom connectors, or maybe I need to get in and use some of the advanced DAX functions that don't exist in Excel's version. Well, I got a couple options then. I could actually start in Excel. I could go and import it into Power BI Desktop, or just start in Power BI Desktop, and then go build some reports and publish those to PowerBI.com as well. So for me, 95% of my models start in Excel first. The reason that I do this more than anything else is because this allows me to go and shape data in a tool that I am very comfortable and very familiar with. It also means that I have the ability to quickly land massive pivot tables that scroll and aren't bound to the size of a page and anything like that. So I get that ability to go back and sanity check my data to see if it looks good before I start pushing it to Power BI. I like to use Power BI more as my reporting tool and Excel as my data cleanup, validation, and modeling tool where I can. As I say, it's not a 100% rule. There's always exceptions to it. But at the end of the day, this is where I generally sort of build most of my stuff. Now, let's talk a little bit about Monkey Tools. So who is the target audience for Monkey Tools? And I always want to be clear about this one because we do actually sell Monkey Tools. So I want to make sure that we're not selling it to people that don't want it. And I want to make sure that you know what's available to you if you need it. So the target audience is generally people that audit like or model like me. It's somebody that go through and build their models using Power Query and Power Pivot in Excel. Maybe they don't have Power BI, maybe they don't want to use Power BI, whichever. But generally, if your modeling starts there, this is where my tools work best. It's also built and targeted on users who need to audit models received from others. And this can be in either Excel or in Power BI. If you're trying to get some idea as to what's actually happening with it, this is where the tool is actually targeted at too. Typically, if I go to something like a SQL Saturday or a Dfinity conference or something like that, we'll go and sit in an Ask the Expert session, one of my favorite places to be. Somebody will actually come to me and they'll start asking me questions about their models, Excel or Power BI. And the first thing that I do is say, can you just put it on a USB? Let me just go and quickly run my tool across it and see what's actually in there. And that way I get a good idea as to some of the potential problems that are actually happening. And I'll show more about the audit stuff in tomorrow's session. We do have a pricing model, as I mentioned. I am a big believer as an MVP. One of the things that I get that award from is from actually giving back to the community. And for that reason, we will always have a forever free version of this particular software. We work on a freemium license, basically, but even after you go through and you run a trial of a pro license, gives you the pro features for 2 weeks, and then it reverts back to free. My hope is that there's enough in the forever free version that you'll keep on working with it. If you like it and you like some of the pro features and you feel that, hey, by going back to forever free, I'm missing out on some really cool and useful tools, then we do have a pro license subscription, and you can find the full details on the pricing here at xlguru.ca/monkeystools. One of the really big things that I want to point out with the way that we actually develop Monkey Tools as well is that even if you're on a forever free version, every couple of weeks, or whenever we develop new features, you'll get an update to the Monkey tools, even on the free version. So if we fix bugs, those go into our free versions as well. We're a big believer of having just one version of the software. I don't want to have multiple ones out there. It's always about just, hey, let's put it out, let's be current, and as long as you have access to the feature, you'll be able to use it. So it's one of our sort of big philosophy pieces around this stuff. The Monkey Tools software itself adds a new tab to the ribbon inside Excel. And it's so long, I actually had to break it up into two components to fit it on one widescreen monitor, which I thought was pretty good, at least for this demo. In Excel, it actually shows up all in one. I've had to expand it a bit. I've actually broken this down into a couple of different things. I got a friend named Wynn Hopkins. He's constantly tweeting about how Excel needs its own Power ribbon, and he builds himself a custom tab that puts all of Power Query and Power Pivot on one ribbon. This is mine. I did the same thing, but I've actually just used some code to do it so that it just installs right out of the gate. We group our things into two kind of different sets of features. We've got convenience features. And when I talk about convenience features, what I'm talking about here is these are native functionality from Excel that I'm just pulling into one tab so it's nice and easy to get to them. A button like, say, Launch Power Query Editor, if you actually use Excel's default menu structure, you have to go to the Data tab, click Get Data, drive all the way down to the bottom, and I think it might be hidden under one submenu as well. I like to raise that right to the top of the list. So these are just nice and quick to help you stop tab flipping all over the place as you're working through things and really bring your entire modeling journey into one tab. The second thing we do is we actually build our Monkey Tools features. And in these particular sets here, we've actually broken them down now into two different categories. We've got what we call monkeys, which are the monkeys that go out and actually do the work and build new stuff. And we've got our sleuths, and the sleuth is an English word for detective. These are the features that we use to go and actually interrogate things and figure out what's actually going on inside them. For today, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go and demonstrate the items that are on the top of this. We're going to take a look at Query Monkey, Destination Sleuth, Query Sleuth, and Time Sleuth. And tomorrow we'll go in and we'll take a look at the modeling side of things where we play around with Pivot Sleuth and DAX Sleuth and Model Sleuth and things like that. So I'm going to actually break this one out right now. I'm just going to get rid of my little PowerPoint here, and I'm going to jump over to Excel, and I'm going to show you some demos of how the software actually works and what we're playing with. So you can see here that I've got Monkey Tools. I should probably mention with this as well, by the way, that we support Excel 2016, 2019, and Office 365 flavors. We do not work in 2013 and earlier. If you're still on 2013, it's time to upgrade. There's a lot of good things coming, like a native built-in Power Query and such, and that's one of the reasons why we can't use Monkey Tools in 2013. Now, you'll notice the convenience features we have here. We've got our Get Data tab with all of our native functionality right around in here. We've got the Launch Power Query Editor, the Show Queries and Connections pane, which will actually pop open the pane, and inside this workbook, it's a completely blank one. There's actually nothing here at all. Now, I'm going to play around with a couple different things, but the very first thing for the demo that I want to look at is I'm going to demo something called Smart Folder here. So I'm just going to do a quick save as on this workbook, and I'm just going to browse down and save this into my demos folder here. And I'm going to replace this one here called Smart Folder Live. And yes, it already exists. That's all good. I'm just going to go and replace that one so that we've got a blank workbook that's now been saved. And that's pretty much the really technical bits about what I actually did here. Now, if you've actually read MS for Data Monkey, you'll know that there is a cool technique that I've got. It's around probably chapter 23 or chapter 24 in the book of working with parameter tables, being able to pull values from an Excel table into your Power Queries. That involves putting in a function and an actual table, and the problem is that spelling inside Power Query is super, super important. So I thought, you know, it'd be way easier rather than having to actually go and copy things from, paste them in and get everything right. Why don't I just put in a button to actually inject the table and inject the function right inside your workbook. So at this point in time now, if I want to go and start actually building this, all I need to do is go and type in one of my queries equals fn get parameter, put in the parameter name, and boom, I can now use it in my queries. A lot easier than finding the text file, copying, pasting, building a table, making sure it's parameters with an S, with parameters with no S on the first one, all that kind of jazz. And if there's one thing that I love my software to do, it's to help me be lazy, because that's what it's really all about, is saving time. I'm just going to go and add something to this one here too. I'm going to add something called folder, and I'm just going to mark this one in as CSVs. There we go. And we'll use that for a demo here in a little bit. Now, one of the challenges that I'm going to run into, though, is that I've got this cool little thing right here. I'm just going to go copy this, and this drives me absolutely batty the way this is done. But if I copy that and go get data from file from SharePoint folder, naturally I want to throw in the whole file path to the exact subfolder I want. And of course, at this point, if I go and try and do this, it's going to come back and it's going to give me an error because you cannot connect to a SharePoint subfolder. One of the mysterious and bizarre ways that things actually work inside SharePoint. Drives me absolutely nuts. But this is what I actually want to connect to. So what I've done here is I've actually built a function called Smart Folder, but I'm actually going to use this one here with the Smart Folder query to create a list of all of the files inside this inside the SharePoint subfolder. It asks me which of the parameters holds the file path. So right here, it's file path has this guy here. So I'm just going to click OK, and it asks me what would I like to call the new query, which I'll call files list. And at this point, it's going to go and make me a new query, which is showing me a little yellow error button here about formula firewall information. Unfortunately, I can't automate my way past this. I would love to. It's basically asking me to set the privacy on this particular piece. So I'm going to go to continue, and I'm going to say my current workbook is set up to organizational, but you'll notice I'm going to leave privacy levels being checked because there's an important thing I want you to be aware of here is that this will work and will avoid the formula firewall even if I leave privacy enabled. And this is an important thing to realize. What's going to happen is it's now going to go and refresh and say, okay, we know that you're working with your organizational structure. The reason I set the workbook to organizational, by the way, is because my SharePoint site is already set in my stuff to organizational as well. And what you'll see now is I've got the files list of the subfolder. So I fed this the full file path, and it actually brought me back what I'm looking for. The function takes care of this for me. In addition, instead of having a full-on list over here in the folder path that has the entire SharePoint URL in front of it, I actually stripped that out. So you're looking now at these are in the root of that folder, and these guys here are now actually the subfolders of this particular file. So just some convenience features to make this a little bit easier.
This is really nice. I've done a lot of this work in only Power BI, but this automates. There's a lot more automation that you're producing here that makes this really a much more pleasant experience, in my opinion.
This is the way that it should have been implemented by Microsoft. Like
yeah.
That, you know, it drives me nuts, right? So, but the big thing that I got to make sure is that I got to be able to make sure of something else with this, because when I'm done with this demo, I want to save this and I want to close it and reopen it. And one of the things that drives me absolutely batty about Excel is depending on whether or not your file is syncing, it either shows up to your local file path or your SharePoint file path, and we got to make sure it refreshes in that instance.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this is that you can do this with Power BI, but when you schedule a refresh using my folder, if you were to actually take this functionality over to Power BI, you would have to use a local gateway, no matter whether your data is actually coming from SharePoint or from a local file. Because the local files is part of the M code, it needs a gateway to refresh it, even if it's pulling from the web-based source. It's a little frustrating, but
Gotcha.
Regardless, at least it still can be sort of set up to work. You might have to modify it a little bit, but at the end of the day here, I've got my nice little folder path here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and filter this down, and I'm going to pick up my CSVs over here. And this will drill me down into this case, and now I'm going to go and combine all the CSV files together. And now we're going to see a problem here because there's going to be a little bit of a formula firewall violation that's going to show up along the way, and there's a reason for this. So let's just let this one actually happen here. It looks like everything is going well, and then what we're going to see is it will come back and it'll give me a nice little error. So there's the file, so all's going nicely, and now it's going to create all my queries on the left-hand side like it does when we combine multiple files. There we go, and then we get this formula firewall. And this drives me a little bit nuts because everything works fine right up to here in my combination steps. I can even see the individual tables of data, and then when you try and expand these, it now comes back and gives me the formula firewall steps. So I'm going to work around this problem. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and delete all of these extra steps that we added here. So we're looking at the source step, and I'm going to get rid of these transform files from transactions. I'm going to delete this group, get rid of all that stuff to pretend that that never happened. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and make myself a new sales query to combine my CSVs. So I'm going to go right-click in reference, and I'm going to go and choose to make this one called sales. And now inside here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter my folder path down. We're going to go with a text filter, and I'm going to choose a begins with. The reason I'm going with this and not just checking CSVs is because it's got a backslash on the end, and if I convert this to a local file path, it switches, which makes it really hard to deal with. So we want to try and avoid that character getting encoded in our M code. And now I'll go and filter this down. There we are. The folder path is good. And now what you'll see is that, actually, you know what? I'm going to do something else here too. Let's go right-click, New Query. Let's go Other Sources, Blank Query. I'm going to make one here called Folder. And let's just leverage the fn get parameter function, and we'll go and pull the folder here. So this should, I hate it when it does that. Come on, there we are. So this one here should now be pulling the appropriate value from the table with the folder link, which it is, CSVs. So that looks cool. So now that I've filtered this particular step to begin with CSVs, I'm just going to go and replace that, make this dynamic. So I'm going to set that up to be folder. Still filters nicely, that's all good. And now I'm going to combine these, and of course this is where things blew up last time. So when I go in now and say let's combine this stuff, what we should see is that this should actually work quite nicely for us. So it's just a little tricks of how to work some of this. And I actually need to sort of update my documentation just a little bit more to suggest the separation. It's interesting because I always stage my queries out this way anyway when I'm building stuff to separate things and make sure, and it tends to help to avoid the form of the firewall in many cases, not all, but in many cases. So at this point, we should get a nice combination. Sales is now refreshing, and we've got no yellow error message. Fantastic. Just going to go and make one quick change to something here too. I just want to change my data type here using locale because these are American date formats, and in Canada we don't use those, and I don't want to end up with any misinterpretation about this. So we're going to go to English United States. There we are. And this will get them interpreted properly. And now when I go back to sales, everything looks good. I can just do my final rename for date and amount. Now, so the first thing that I want to recognize about this thing here is I'm now connecting directly to a SharePoint subfolder, nice and easy. I've got this stuff pulled in, I've combined my files, I've avoided the formula firewall altogether. Privacy is still being checked, it's still working. That's good. What I love about this setup is that I now have the ability to go back to my files list query. There's another file that I want in here. I'm going to right click and reference this because I also want to pick up budgets. Budgets are in the Loaded Pencil Enterprises database, so I'm going to filter my folder path here, text filters, and we're going to go again, begins with, and I'm just going to go and pick up this source data, just to make sure that we don't pick up that trailing backslash again. There it is, and now I'm going to drill into this nice little Access database, which is sitting on my SharePoint site. So here she comes. We should have about 5 or 6 tables in here, if I recall correctly on this one of which is my budgets. Come on, Power Query, let's go. A little faster, please. This is one area, I don't know if you experienced this, Mike, but I really wish they would invest some stuff in making this engine faster. It's
You wait till you work with data flows, because data flows is basically Power Query in the cloud, and you'll be even more impressed by the speed.
Oh, fantastic. I was hoping you were going to say that it's really impressive, but
no, it's not. So
like,
apparently Excel and Power BI Desktop do a lot of, like, even though it's a little bit laggy, they do run a bunch of queries behind the scenes for you to kind of start hydrating the data for you. But in the service, in data flows, they don't do that quite yet. So I think there's work being done to improve the performance there. But yeah, I still love working in Excel and Power BI. It seems to be like the fastest engine out there right now at this point.
Geez, and I was just emailing with complaining of how slow it is. So hopefully I can drive them to do some more on locally that will hopefully go to the cloud.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So what I've actually done now, if I go back and I take a look at the query chain that I'm actually playing around with in this case here, is I've actually gone and built all these queries up really quickly here. And the big thing is that virtually everything is coming from my SharePoint files list, and it's feeding through to a budgets table and a sales table over here. So we've got a lot of information that's all being used and chained nicely together in order to pull all this stuff out. Now, at this point, one of the things that will happen is that everybody will go and they'll say, okay, I want to commit all these queries, and you hit close and load. And unlike Power BI, where you can actually go and take a look at individual queries and say whether or not you want them to load, in Excel, you get one load destination for everything you've created. So at this point, I'm now creating, because files list was already done previously as a connection only query by my software. Oh, hey, look, I see some errors in sales. Oh, well, no worries. So I've got 3 queries here that have all been loaded into tables inside my Excel worksheet. Now, that's not ideal for what I really want, but there's a couple of issues that I sort of want to throw around with us. Number one, I can easily go and make this a connection-only query. All I need to do is go through all of the worksheets and figure out where it is, and then right-click on it and delete the worksheet. That'll delete the worksheet, cleaning up the litter that's been left behind, and it will automatically set it to connection-only. The problem is I got to go through every single one of these things to find it. The other thing that I don't know, this tells me what rows are loaded, but it doesn't tell me where. So unless I go and start looking at each one, I don't know if it's loaded to a worksheet, to the data model, or something, what is going on. So we built this little tool here called Destination Sleuth. Destination Sleuth comes through and it actually color codes all of the individual queries that have been used. So we've got yellow queries here are all connection-only ones, and everything that's in blue has been loaded to an Excel worksheet. Now, one of the things that I want to do is I can see right here that budgets has been loaded to worksheet 5 and sales has been loaded to sheet 3. I really wish that my sheet names were sales and budget. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go name the sheets after queries. I'll select budgets and sales, and we'll update these sheet names. And what you'll see down the bottom here is that now budgets is on budgets and sales is on sales. So that makes it super, super easy rather than have to go through and find each worksheet and manually rename them. At this point, I look at folder though, and I go, folder, I mean, that was supposed to be a variable. Like, I don't really need that anywhere. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change this to be a connection-only query, and I'm going to delete the host worksheet right away. So we'll make sure folder selected, update the load destination. It says, hey, are you sure you want to do this? We say okay. And at this point, sheet 4 disappears. It gets set to connection only. Now, why would you actually go and do that? Well, you wouldn't if you're only doing one. But if you're doing 19 different worksheets that you loaded out, this starts to make this process a lot faster. If I want to go now and realize, boy, you know what, my sales and my budgets, I should have loaded them to the data model. Well, the option in regular Excel is to go right-click on the sales worksheet, change the load destination to data model, and then go back and delete the actual worksheet. And then when I want budgets, go back and do it again, which basically means I have to babysit my computer and wait for the load process on every single one. That's way too much waiting time and manual work for me. So we built this part here to say, I would like to change this to the data model. We'll make sure we delete the host worksheet. I'm going to go update my load destinations. And at this point, what Monkey Tools does is it actually goes through the process. It will delete the worksheets, and it will actually load this to the data model. Now, to be fair, we can't load in bulk, so we actually automate the process the way that you would do it. We have to do one at a time. But the big difference is, at this point, it's now loading to the data model, which takes time. Here goes budgets right there. We can see that it's actually now started spinning. There's usually a good 20-second, 30-second delay between creating the query and when it actually starts to load. But the beauty of this is that I can now go and set this and walk down the hallway to get a coffee and come back, and this will be done for me, rather than being tied to my desk doing each one after the other. So I can actually go and multitask on something else, which is what I want some time in my life to go and do, is deal with that. So here goes sales. It's running its stuff through. Bingo, there we go. And we've loaded our 3,800 rows with 2,400 errors in it to a nice little table here. And I'm not going to bother debugging the errors on this. I'll have to take a look into that later. But for right now, that's my destination sleuth, so we can quickly go through and change things in bulk. You can see that we've got budgets and sales are now green. Everything else is yellow. Really the whole sort of concept behind this was really getting an idea as to where does this loaded actually mean, and getting a really quick comprehensive look. You can also, by the way, go through and say, I don't want to see any of my connection-only queries, so we can filter this down or show me the worksheet ones and whatnot. So just something to play around with, and we can even switch in to take a look at other workbooks you have open as well.
What does the other colors down there mean? You had like a blue, an orange, and a green down below there. What were the designations on those? So
green goes to the data model. Blue or orange is where you've got something that goes to the table and the data model. So if I were to take something like folder, for example, and switch this one out and say table and data model. Now, honestly, I don't ever do this. This is not a thing that I would generally do. But basically what it'll do is it'll actually go and it'll create the worksheet for me, and it'll load it to the data model. So I've got it in both individual places.
Okay.
Again, I'm not a big fan of that, because it actually means that I've got duplication of data, and there's not really a good reason. I'd rather feed my stuff out from the data model using a pivot table. Sure. What people do. So you know what? We try to serve what people do. So there you go.
Sounds good. That makes sense.
All right. Now, Here's what I want to point out at this point in time. We notice this is actually sitting in a SharePoint site. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to save this, and I'm actually going to close this worksheet, and I'm going to flip this out to take a look at the local folder. So we're letting Excel close, and here is the folder, and we can see this is the file that I'm dealing with. So I just got to let this go and sync into SharePoint, make sure that it's all synced first. Otherwise, it might not work completely correctly. Always best to let it do its thing, and it never goes fast enough for what I want. Come on, SharePoint. Let's do our thing here. All right, Smart Folder Live is synced. Excellent. So now what we'll do is we'll go and say, let's pause syncing on our SharePoint, our OneDrive client here for 2 hours. Just wait for the perfect. And now I'm going to double click on this and open it up. And what you'll see now is that we should be in a local file path. Indeed, we've got C users can Puls, so this is where my data is actually stored. If I go back to Monkey Tools and I show my queries and connections pane, or to the data tab and show this, you can see that all of my queries are still going to be here. There they are. And now what I would like to do with this is I would like to go and just hit refresh all. And if everything works correctly, we should see the same data actually being loaded here. Budgets and sales should start spinning. There shouldn't be any errors. We shouldn't get any warnings about privacy. Everything should just work. And this is something, if you don't, if you haven't ever done this, this is a real pain to try and set up properly. And there it goes, nice and fast, so much faster to run from local.
Let me pause you there for a second. I don't think people, this is a big point, right? So you did everything configuration-wise to point to a SharePoint location. Save the file. It now points to a local location because you're syncing SharePoint with local files. So from a performance standpoint, I'm not relying on SharePoint to update some things. I'm not having to do a bunch of, and now while you're working on this file, for now, it will be pointing locally now. Is that correct?
And and locally is, because it doesn't have to go out over the web to get your data, locally is always faster when you're dealing with your development. So that's a big thing. I mean, and if you're working as a consultant, the big issue that you've got is that, I mean, I've worked on stuff where I keep my stuff in my SharePoint site, and my consultants or my clients don't have SharePoint. So I need to go with the local file path. And I mean, I remember when I first started doing this, and I contacted the Excel team, and they're like, yeah, well, when you put it in a folder that's in OneDrive, it's going to put the SharePoint path. And there's no way, because it automatically smart switches the file path when you open. I mean, I'm using a crazy Excel function on this, but basically what this is doing is it's pulling back the path. If the SharePoint syncing is off, it gives me the local one. If it's on, it gives me the other one. And there's no way to figure out what the local file path is if it's in SharePoint, not with VBA, not with a formula, not with anything. So for me, I needed something that was going to be able to allow me to develop in either state and have it automatically work when I deploy it to my client. And this lets me do that.
This is huge. This is amazing. This is really, really slick. I did not know it could do this. And I'm selfishly loving these webinar series around tooling from people who create them, because there's things I learn at every single one of these that there's just people who have thought this stuff out way better than I have and have done some incredible work. This is really neat.
So here's the other fun thing, just so you're aware on this one too, Mike, is that like one of my big philosophies when I'm actually dealing with all this stuff, I need to edit. One of my big philosophies on this is that the only thing that I am doing in this case is actually automating the process of doing stuff that you can do manually. This is all about making your life easier.
Yes.
I am a huge believer in the do no harm philosophy. If you build stuff with my tools, you will never need to have your end user run my tools in order for them to work.
Yep.
I'm not trying to go in and saturate your entire company with the licensing. What that means is if you know how to read M code, there's the function. You can tear that apart. You can learn how it works. You can modify it to work with your Power BI instance. I've given you some background as to what's actually there and whatever else. But at the end of the day, I'm not trying to hide anything here. This is not a smoke and mirror show. This is hey, I'm being lazy trying to make it easier and faster for you to do work show.
I love it. I love the be lazy thing, because that's my shtick as well. I'm a lazy engineer. I like doing it once and having it done correctly, so I don't have to come back and touch it again. This is perfect. Love it.
I like to joke. It's I'm super lazy. I mean, efficient. That's the word, right? But I mean, at the same time, I mean, my mom once gave me trouble when I was a teenager. She said, you spend an hour trying to figure out the fastest way to load or unload the dishwasher so that you can get like 5 minutes back to go and play a video game. And I'm like, what's wrong with this?
There's no
Like,
problem here.
I'm willing to invest that time because I know that I'm going to get a lot more video game time over the over the whole thing. Absolutely,
Yes,
right? It's all about trying to figure
that's
out what's
awesome.
the best use of all this stuff. So,
That's amazing.
that's the smart folder function. I mean, that's just one piece, and we've got a few different pieces along the way here. I mean, you can insert just the smart folder function. These guys here are forever free. What that means though is you got to hook them up. These guys down the bottom of this thing, those ones are part of they work under the free trial, but then they revert to the pro license after 2 weeks. So if you wanted to just go and inject the whole thing and be hooked up, you've got to, well, that's where you reward us for doing the hard work on these things. So, all right, let me close this one. I'm going to go into a different demo here. So I'll get rid of this guy, and I'm going to open up a new one here. And I believe the file that I'm looking for is Query Monkey Base Model. So inside this guy, I have some data tables that are stored inside this workbook. They really should be in an external workbook if you're doing things right, but you'll notice we have a sales table, I've got a budget table with 76 rows, and I've got a categories table here. And if I take a look at this, I've got queries for all these guys, and if I go and take a look inside my, my Power Pivot data model, you'll notice that we've got our 3 tables are in here, and they are linked together in a nice format for a nice star schema that I'm building up. But I'm missing some stuff. And the first thing that I'm missing is I'm missing a calendar table to link my 2 sets of dates together. Now, there are a variety of ways to build calendar tables, and there are also a variety of formats that your calendar tables might want to actually deal with. One simple way in an Excel file is just to go and make a nice little table, put a date in this cell, say equals that plus 1, run it all the way down, but then you've got problems updating at the year end. So why wouldn't you use Power Query? So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this cool feature that we built called Calendar Monkey. And what Calendar Monkey does is it actually brings you up a little bit of a wizard here, and it says, what type of calendar would you like? And we build 12-month, 445, 454, 13 fiscal months. I'm going to show you my year end, which is for Excel Guru. We use a September 30th year end just because we like to be just a little bit different. And I'm going to call this calendar and load this to the data model. I don't trim my calendars. I always run them the entire fiscal year. And because I want this dynamic, I'm going to say, I'd like you to look inside my sales table and find the earliest date in my sales table. That's going to be that's the year that I want it to run from. And I want to run to the latest date of my budgets because I typically budget before I actually do my sales. Now, I used to work for an organization that didn't do that, so that would be a little bit trickier. But at this point, this is going to create me a calendar that spans the entire fiscal year boundaries. I'm then going to go next, and I'm going to choose the columns that I want. Inside here, we've given you a whole bunch of different options in order to deal with this. I've checked what I believe are the most common. However, because I'm super lazy, I mean efficient, if you change these options, they actually log them so that next time you come back, we observe the defaults that you like. In addition, if you chose a 445, there will be one more section over in this area for your periodicity columns, period ID, year ID, month ID, quarter ID. Those would show up as well. But for me, I want my fiscal year, my quarter fiscal year, my months, what is the actual month name, and a couple of other columns. So I'm going to say next. We then say, hey, look, you chose that you wanted these to come from sales and budgets, dates columns, so you want us to relate them to those. If there were any other tables inside this model that had date columns, they would also show up here, so you can check those boxes to automatically relate it to those with a maximum of 1 per table because that's all we're allowed to do inside Excel. I can't create inactive relationships, unfortunately, like you can in Power BI. I can't do that via code. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Create, and what Calendar Monkey is doing is it's created a start date and an end date query. Those are going to be the start and end of my fiscal calendars. It's then creating the actual calendar itself, and it creates it. It's now created. It's going to take about 20 seconds or 30 seconds to actually load all of this stuff in. It's faster if you're running locally, not on SharePoint. Also, of course, faster if you disable privacy, but I haven't done that. And you'll notice that it's actually loaded them in, it's created the relationships, and then it gives you a nice little message here that says, here, as a recommended practice, we actually recommend that you hide your foreign keys from your tables so that you don't end up getting into problems, and here's the steps. Now, one thing that's important around this dialog, we give you the option to next time automatically close this on success. I don't do that the first time because these steps are important, and if you don't know, you should actually be going into Manage Data Model and going to Diagram View, and we'll see that the calendar is here. And now I'm trying to remember what those steps are, but our little user form, you can actually bring back on screen so you can see it. So you can say, oh, okay, right, this is what I need to do. So I'm going to go over to Date, right-click, Hide from Client Tools, and right-click and Hide from Client Tools. For
This
reference,
is cool.
you should also do that. I wish I could do this part automatically. I just don't have anything in the object model that we can do it, but we'll just hide those guys off as well. And now I should probably, of course, go over to my my calendar table and say, hey, look, you know, my month here, I want to sort this one by the month of fiscal year, and my day short, I'll go and sort this one by the where are we here? This is going to be day of week. And again, I wish I could set up the sorting columns automatically as well, but unfortunately there's a lot of holes in the object model that we just can't play with, and we've done a lot of stuff that you just can't do, but there are some things that are still a bit of a blocker to us. So now that I've got all that set up,
there's a whole other discussion around calendars in general. I mean, this is incorporating a ton of best practices just by using this, because when you do it in Power BI, there's a number of calendars on the internet. I have a couple calendars you can use verbatim in DAX on PowerBI.tips. But like, this is really a lot of the best practices around how do you get a calendar in, how do you relate it to other tables, and how do you audit. 445 blows my mind. I hate 445 calendars. They're stupid. I hate them. but the fact that this can build your 445s, I've got numerous questions around how to get a 445 in here, and this sounds like the easiest way to do it.
So check this out. I've already got a calendar in here for my fiscal calendar, but let's say that I'm doing payroll and my my year end. Let's say that this year end is going to be December 27th is the first day of my year here. So I'm going to go back and say, look, you know what? I want to start this again based on sales and budget. So again, I've already got a regular fiscal calendar in here, but I'm going to go now and I'm going to say, hey, let's go. And I can't relate to sales and budget right now because I've hidden them, unfortunately. So we actually tell you that. So that's again another shortcoming of this. But at this point in time, I'm now going and adding a 445 calendar to the same model. So now I can actually report in two different ways as well. Because why not? Right?
Sick.
I mean,
I've
done that before. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is real world stuff that like. This is the part that kills you as an analyst is when it's like, yeah, but my company does something weird and different. Now, I do want to point out with the 445 calendars, what we don't do is we don't deal with the crazy catch-up week scenario. That is something we might do at some point in time, but if you know where your periods are, then hopefully this, you know, if you're within that sort of block of a normal one, this will be nice and easy. And as I say, we do with the 445, 454, 544, as well as the 13 fiscal periods per year. So I love calendars. I think they're crazy. Right, so
that kills me. That's amazing.
So now
you're convincing me, Ken. This is to me. I'm thinking with all the automation you're providing here with things that are in this. I'm thinking I need to start learning more about modeling. I do all my modeling in Power BI. I'm thinking I need to do more modeling for stuff in Excel now.
Well, you know, I mean, here's a killer. I really wish that I could do this and actually inject this directly into Power BI, but we can't write queries in Power BI, which drives me nuts because I would love to. Here's another one, by the way. A lot of people love measure tables, right? So let's create a measures table. We'll call it underscore measures because you can't call it just plain old measures. Correct. And it now says, look, you want to go and hide this main column. And there's, I'll show reasons to, why on this one tomorrow. But if I go into diagram view here and say right click and hide from client tools here, at this point in time, I've got a disconnected one. Now I couldn't link this before, so let me just link this now because you know let's say why not. And at this point, now I've got my nice little measures table. One of the things that I do want to do, we haven't done it yet, is I don't have the ability to bring this measures dialog over onto the Monkey Tools ribbon. And unfortunately, this is an add-in, so we can't actually touch it. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to build a couple of quick little measures here. I'm going to store them on my measures table. So there we go. And we'll call one something like, how about sales dollars? Which is going to be a nice and easy sum of sales amount. And I'll just make this one a whole number. One thing that I do plan to do with this, we haven't got there yet, but it is going to be coming at some point, is I actually want to build my own version of the quick measures for Power BI for Excel. One of the things, though, that I'm a big fan of, I'm a huge fan of explicit measures. I don't like implicit measures. And one of the parts that I feel that Power BI didn't do for us that I wish they had is a very simple, what about just can I sum or can I count these columns? Like they do complicated ones, but they don't do easy ones. So that's where naturally we're going to start with those and hopefully build sort of a more wizard generated version of this as well. So that's in our plans. We just haven't quite got there yet. So
may I make a feature request here that I think that most guys who do like the measures gallery or the quick measures, I really wish there was a way for other people or other community members to add in features into those quick measures. Something that I feel like it would be a needed feature here at some point is let the community generate the features that they need for quick measures, and provide a mechanism to import those. So I would love to contribute to the quick measures gallery, and yours too as well, if that's a feature that you're thinking that might be enabled.
We're looking at, I mean, we've definitely thought about how would somebody go and store their own things that they've written and be able to recall them, having a database behind the scenes. We haven't quite got there yet, but but that is definitely something that we are thinking about. So,
cool.
So I'm just going to go and flip this out for a second and put this down here. But here's the thing that I want you to recognize about this is that when I go and sort all this kind of stuff out, the earliest date that I actually have in my model is the data itself is actually from a December 31st year end. So the first sale I have is actually from January 2018, I believe. Sorry, January 2018. Yeah. So here's my here's my September year end. So that's the September 2018 year end. October is the first month inside my 2019 year end, and October is the first month in my 2020 year end. So this is working with that nice little calendar table that I actually set all up, and we're now following along with sort of recommended practices as we go through this. We've got a nice little measures table. It's flagged as such and is showing with the actual fact icon up the top here, and the other guys are dimensions, although there's a little bit more work. I'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. So that's again, I mean, we're trying to find these things that make your life a little bit easier along the way. I want to show one more feature before we're going to be done for today, and that's around this one here. We're going to show you two pieces actually, Query Sleuth and Time Sleuth. And these are a couple of other pieces that we're really proud of here. So in our Query Sleuth, one of the things that drives me absolutely nuts is if I want to go and look at M code, I need to open the Power Query editor, find the query, go to the View tab, and go to the Advanced Editor. And if I want to look at another query, I have to close the Advanced Editor, go find the other query, and then go into the Advanced Editor. So there's a lot of click steps that need to go through on this. In addition, I find that the query tracer, being able to go through and figure out how queries are related, is very difficult to work with. So we built this guy here. It's a simple little tree view of what we actually have. So here's the thing that I can look at. There's a query that loads the data model. Let me just show the legend here. So green tables load to the data model. If I go and click on the little plus here, it says there are two queries that are involved in this. There's data and there's lookup table. And we actually have all of our M code over here in an indented format, which you just don't get from what's actually normally in there. Normally, it will look, oh, I've already saved this one. Normally, it'll look a little bit different. That's interesting. So we can see here's data. It's highlighted in yellow. That's one of the precedent queries. Here's lookup table. It's also highlighted in yellow as one of the precedent queries. So I can very quickly scroll this list and go, hey, wait, lookup table shows up again. It's actually been used twice in this. I gotta be honest with you, I find it really hard to read unindented M code now. I can actually very quickly scan this and actually get an idea of what's going on. We've tried to keep the color syntax highlighting similar to what's in the inside the Power Query user interface, but it gives us a nice little ability to go through and take a look at things. I'm going to go and take a look at buffered here, and if I double click on it, it'll expand all the preferences as well. This is what it looks like inside the Power Query editor right now. I'm going to go and flip this back into an indented format. There we are. So we can actually see that we've got a nice big long query here, and then I'm going to look at this other one called unbuffered. Now, the difference between buffered and unbuffered is really right here. We've added this table.buffer around the lookup table. That's the only difference between these two queries. Why am I showing you this? Because I needed a pattern for an approximate match, similar to Excel's VLOOKUP approximate match. Back when we wrote MS for DataMonkey, I wrote this function in order to do a complete VLOOKUP comparison. So it would allow you to say, what's the, where's the data, or what are you looking up, where's the data, which column do you want to get back, and would you like it to be a true or approximate match? What's interesting is that we actually came up with another way to do this. So I would like to try and figure out, is there a time difference between the buffered and the unbuffered version, knowing that the only section of code that's any different is this one line right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this little thing here called Time Sleuth. And in the Time Sleuth, it shows me all queries that load to a destination. It shows me, are they loading to data models or worksheet tables? And I'm going to grab these two, buffered and unbuffered. And what I'd like to do is refresh these a few times. But just for fun, I'm going to chart the variation. I'm going to do it over 3 trials just so we don't take a ton of time. And I'm going to double this to show whether or not there's a different effect by having privacy on or off. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit refresh selected. So this is to be honest with you, it's a rudimentary timer, but it's a lot easier to work with than a stopwatch because it's a little bit more accurate there. But there are some components that you got to be aware of when working with Power Query. Power BI now has detailed diagnostics report. Excel doesn't have those yet. I'm waiting for them, and I'm desperate for them because then I could actually get a lot more out of this, like timing individual steps and things like that. One of the things you got to be careful with, though, and one of the reasons why I always recommend running multiple trials on this, you kind of set this up, run the trial, go get coffee, and come back. And the reason why I do this is because Power Query actually runs its query chains on a single-threaded environment. What that means is you can be in the middle of refreshing a query and then something like, I don't know, your Teams live call can decide that it's going to use some of that thread, and suddenly it slows the whole thing down. So if you want to try and get a good benchmark on these, what you try and do is close down all your other programs, set this thing up, go have a run on the, run it 3 to 5 times or whatever else, and then come back to it and take a look. And what you'll notice here is that we're doing a few different trials. The first ones have privacy checks disabled, so privacy is off. And it's telling me how long the buffered queries take versus the unbuffered. And you can already see in this one that buffered is much faster than the unbuffered version. What it's going to do once it's finished trial 1-3 here is it's now going to go into trial 2-1, and it's turned privacy back on. And we're going to see whether or not it actually has any effects of this. Once it's actually run through this, and I think we've probably got about a minute and a half before this is done now, maybe even 2. What's going to happen is it's going to run through the rest of these guys here, and then it's going to actually dump it over into a worksheet, and it's going to put a box and whisker chart on it so that we can actually go back and see what is the variation for the different refreshes, where are the outliers, what's the means, all those kind of things, if you know how to read a box and whisker chart, to sort of get some information out of it. What do I use this for? I'm not using this for high performance testing. What I use it for is a couple things. When somebody comes back to me and says, hey, Ken, one of the patterns that you built isn't very efficient. I think this one's better. I'll take theirs, I'll take mine, we'll set up a data set, we'll run it, and we can actually test and see, is the performance of theirs actually better? And if it is, we adjust our patterns. And if it's not, we say, hey, look, in our trials, it looks a little bit different. The other thing that I'll use this for is I actually, one of the very first models that I built after I quit my full-time job and went into consulting was for a housing development. And this thing was an incredible Power Query masterpiece. It had about 60 queries in it. It was just insane. And it took 14 minutes to refresh the entire stack. And what I wanted to know is which query is holding up the process. Because I hit refresh all and you walk away. I'm not going to sit there for 14 minutes watching this darn thing do its thing. And what I was able to actually figure out was that 80% of the overhead burden came from one query. So at that point, I was able to go back and figure out which one I need to spend my time optimizing. All right, here's the chart. One part that just drives me absolutely nuts. This is what we call an Ivy chart. It's one of the newer charts in Excel. And one of the things that they don't actually put on my chart for me is an actual legend, and I cannot automate that process. It's missing in the object model, which is crazy. But what you can see here is with privacy off, you'll notice that the amount of variation in the case of buffered is actually pretty similar, but it looks like it's slightly faster. And in the unbuffered query, you'll notice that the privacy off is always running slightly faster, and the variation is actually less than what we see in unbuffered. If I take a look specifically at the buffered query, you can see that the buffered version, even with privacy off, runs slightly faster than what we actually have going on over here. So this gives me a little bit of a benchmark. These are pretty close. I don't know that I would really be fussed on working with the privacy levels either way on this one. But what I want to show you is some query timings that I ran before, and this is actually quite interesting. Because in this particular one, where I was actually running, I ran 5 trials on this particular setup. And I don't know what else was going on my system today. Maybe they have tweaked something. But you can see that the unbuffered version using the PQV lookup here was incredibly slow compared to what the buffered version was. In addition, when you look at the amount of variation that you see based on the height of the box, buffered was almost always instant. But there's also this other one over here that's doing even better. So what I'm going to do with this guy right now is I'm going to go and filter this one down, and I'm actually going to get rid of the unbuffered query altogether. And I want to look at these two because This is actually kind of an interesting component too. UI driven, which means this is a user interface driven method of doing the approximate match, is almost instant. And this is something that one of my buddies actually alerted me to this with a different pattern that we actually use for doing our approximate matches now. We've actually built something completely driven through the user interface, no code whatsoever, and it actually runs way faster even than a buffered version of the version that I actually included in MS for DataMonkey, which is kind of cool. So we've learned some different things around this kind of piece. But you know, when you're timing this on a stopwatch, it's really hard to actually figure this out. When you get to run it multiple times using this and actually see what those effects are, it's interesting because you can actually now start to actually get some trends and see some things out of it. Even if it does consume your system for an hour while you're running your trials and come back, you'll get some good information that you can actually take a look at to give you an idea as to what's going on. I'm really looking forward to when they finally bring me over the advanced diagnostics we have in Power BI, because at that point we'll be able to get a lot deeper into this and start looking at what steps are actually taking up the time and different things like that, and even potentially giving you recommendations around those. Is there different step orders you should try or different steps that you should add or remove because they are potentially going to be penalizing. And I know the Power Query team is doing work in that as well, but that level of diagnostic detail would be fantastic to have. So.
This again, I'm nothing but smiles on my side. This is absolutely incredible being able to watch. Nothing. Okay, again, I've been working in Power BI since it came out. Like I'm super familiar with it. A lot of the patterns you're showing me are patterns that I do by clicking on things. I just know how to automate Power Query things and how to bring in data. But this is blowing my mind, and the fact that you're also taking information about query data and you're putting it into charts for me makes it very impactful and like actionable. This is what we should be doing. This is really slick.
This is the thing, right? Like, I mean, when you go and you run the Power BI diagnostics, you get a massive table that dumps out, and you look at it and you go,
"What now?
What now?" And that's what I mean. I played around a little bit with the Power BI stuff. I mean, Excel does have a diagnostics file, but it kicks out in a text file, and I spent about 3 hours trying to understand it, and finally went, you know what? The Power BI one's a JSON version. It's a lot easier. I know they're going to change it. I'm like, this isn't a good investment of time. But at the end of the day, you're right. It's all about actionable insight and just you know, landing data in front of me doesn't help me. Data is not information. Those are two totally different things.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm trying to actually provide information. I'm not, you know, again, you can run this trial. I can do this 6 or 7 days in a row. I'm going to get slightly different results. But what I can tell you is that the overall pattern every time that I've run this is very, here's another one that's really interesting. If you actually also load this to the data model, look at what happens when privacy is on when you load it to, or off when you load it to the data model versus when privacy is on when you load it to the data model. That's insane, right? So, you know, definitely privacy becomes a big issue in those cases. But, you know, the cool thing around this is that you see that the UI-driven versions are always faster than what's going on, and the buffered is always faster than the unbuffered. So there's a set of trends there that I can actually see that are consistent, and that's really what I'm actually looking at more than anything else. Is just about, is it consistent or is it not consistent? That's what it's really sort of actually looking at in these cases. So you know, it's not going to be perfect, but it is a heck of a lot better than sitting out with a stopwatch and doing the timing and whatnot. And again, you can set this and walk away for your lunch break, come back and go, okay, now I can take a look at it. And that's, you know, not all times created equal, right? I'd rather be able to go do something else while I'm looking at that. So
there's a slight tweak in here that I see. Again, looking at both tools. So I've been an Excel guy for my entire career. I love Excel. That's where I started. And then only when I found Power Query was what pushed me into the Power BI space, because I was so enamored with the incredible amount of automation that could be provided through Power Query. And what you're showing me here is something that I've never really seen on the Power BI side, is the depths at which you're now creating tools around generating code that you're going to reuse multiple times in Power Query, which that's something that's Power BI is not open to that yet. There is no ability for you to automate things in Power Query at this point.
That's correct. Yeah, and that's I mean, I'm dying for that. Yeah, I'm dying for that. I mean, and I've had that question. I mean, you know, people look at it and they go like, hey, look, you injected your calendar table. How come I can't inject that directly into a Power BI model? Because what I'll show tomorrow is that we can actually connect to Power BI desktop files. But I can't push my Power Queries in there because there's no back-end engine that allows me to do so.
Yes.
I mean, there was one, but it involved closing the file, extracting the M code, doing stuff, and pushing it back in. But once they moved to the enhanced metadata format, that route died.
Yes.
And so I'm going, okay, well, that's a kind of a non-starter. So we're waiting for an opportunity, because I would love to be able to take this and say, hey, read from your Power BI model, inject this stuff back into Power BI. At that point, it makes sense for me to actually build a tool that lives inside Power BI, like DAX Studio, like Tabular Editor, that are right on that ribbon. But right now, I mean, I can read your stuff, but I can't really do anything with it. So that's why we haven't actually invested in that particular process yet. So
yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Ton of sense.
All right. Well, you know what? I'm thinking, so at this point in time, what I've sort of done is I've worked my way across the first half of our ribbon, and I'm thinking, Mike, what it makes sense to do is probably to finish off for today, because we're about an hour now.
Yep, we are at
and
time.
come back tomorrow and take a look at what happens on the right-hand side of this ribbon as well.
Yes,
So
please.
So what I'll do here is I'll just throw up sort of a closing piece on this one to say that if you like what you see and whatnot, this is the place. Whoop, let me go back one. This is where you can actually go to find out some information on it. I blog about the features that we're building at my blog, and if you're interested more about the actual Monkey Tools product or want to download a trial, you can hit the link in the top right-hand corner, and that's where you'll find that. And outside of that, tomorrow we'll come back and we'll take a look at Pivot Sleuth and DAX Sleuth and Model Sleuth and some other components around what else we've done to try and help with other pieces.
Doggone it! If you didn't just blow my mind the entire time, this is absolutely incredible. Super thrilled. Ken, thank you very much for all your time today. I appreciate the incredible knowledge that you bring to this. And I'm never in all these webinar things, I'm always astounded by the amount of information other people know that I literally need to be learning every single day. And it's very selfish for me to have these webinars because I like learning this stuff just as much as the next person. So
it's all good, man. This is the fun part of it, right? I mean, I'm going to be honest. I mean, we talked at the before we came on camera here about that I've been building this thing for. I mean, there's variations in my code blocks that go back to 2012 with PowerPivot that we haven't even seen yet, and Power Query. I started playing around with it, I think 2015 maybe, once Power Query finally came to Excel. And I built these as passion projects to make my life easier, and it's fun now to be able to actually put it out and share it with people. And hopefully help other people with the parts that I've struggled with, because like a lot of this is hard, but that's what the beauty of tools is, when what I'm really trying to do is bring this from an end user perspective. I mean, I built these because I needed them, and to share that with other people to hopefully make their lives easier is what this is really all about. So.
Well, I guarantee you, this tool is worth every penny that people will pay to make sure they get all the features. It is absolutely neat. I think people would pay just for 445, just verbatim, just for that tool feature alone. Love it. Well, Ken, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We'll be so for those of people who have joined online and those are going to catch the meeting tomorrow, we have recorded this. This will be on the Power BI Tips YouTube channel. We have a tools section. We've gone through a number of great tools: Tabular Editor, DAX Studio, ALM Toolkit, and now Monkey Tools as part of this really rich tooling space that is now a part of Power BI and Excel. I hope you guys enjoyed this. We'll keep doing this one. Ken will be on tomorrow, same time. It'll be 1 p.m. and we'll go from 1 p.m. to 2 again. And I'll send out some more stuff on Twitter and let everyone know. Ken, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.